And now she beats her heart whereat it groans, that all the neighbour caves, as seeming troubled, make verbal repetition of her moans. Passion on passion deeply is redoubled. Ay me, she cries, and 20 times woe, woe, and 20 echoes 20 times cry so. She, marking them, begins a wailing note, and sings extemporally a woeful ditty, how love makes young men thrall, and old men dote, how love is wise in folly, foolish, witty. Her heavy anthem still concludes in woe, and still the choir of echoes answers so. Her song was tedious, and outwore the night, for lovers' hours are long, though seeming short. If please themselves, others, they think, delight in such like circumstance, with such like sport. Their copious stories, oftentimes begun, end without audience, and are never done. For who hath she to spend the night withal, but idle sounds resembling parasites, like shrill-tongued tapsters answering every call, soothing the humour of fantastic wits? She says, "'Tis so," they answer all, "'Tis so," and would say after her, if she said, "No." Lo, here the gentle lark, weary of rest, from his moist cabinet mounts up on high, and wakes the morning, from whose silver breast the sun ariseth in his majesty, who doth the world so gloriously behold, that cedar tops and hills see burnished gold. Venus salutes him with this fair good morrow. O thou clear God and patron of all light, from whom each lamp and shining star doth borrow the beauteous influence that makes him bright, there lives a son that sucked an earthly mother, may lend thee light, as thou dost lend to other. This said, she hasteth to a myrtle grove, musing the morning is so much o'erworn, and yet she hears no tidings of her love. She hearkens for his hounds and for his horn. Anon she hears them chant it lustily, and all in haste she coasteth to the cry. And as she runs, the bushes in the way, some catch her by the neck, some kiss her face, some twine about her thigh to make her stay. She wildly breaketh from their strict embrace, like a milch doe whose swelling dugs do ache, hasting to feed her fawn hid in some brake. By this she hears the hounds are at a bay, whereat she starts, like one that spies an adder wreathed up in fatal folds just in his way, the fear whereof doth make him shake and shudder. Even so the timorous yelping of the hounds appalls her senses, and her spirit confounds. For now she knows it is no gentle chase, but the blunt boar, rough bear, or lion proud, because the cry remaineth in one place, where fearfully the dogs exclaim aloud. Finding their enemy to be so cursed, they all strain curtsy who shall cope him first. This dismal cry rings sadly in her ear, through which it enters to surprise her heart, who, overcome by doubt and bloodless fear, with cold, pale weakness numbs each feeling part. Like soldiers, when their captain once doth yield, they basely fly, and dare not stay the field. Thus stands she in a trembling ecstasy, till cheering up her senses all dismayed, she tells them 'tis a causeless fantasy, and childish error, that they are afraid, bids them leave quaking, bids them fear no more. And with that word she spied the hunted boar, whose frothy mouth bepainted all with red, like milk and blood being mingled both together. A second fear through all her sinews spread, which madly hurries her, she knows not whither. This way she runs, and now she will no further, and back retires to rate the boar for Merthyr. 1,000 spleens bear her 1,000 ways. She treads the path that she untreads again. Her more than haste is mated with delays, like the proceedings of a drunken brain, full of respects, yet naught at all respecting, in hand with all things, naught at all effecting. Here, kennelled in a brake, she finds a hound, and asks the weary caitiff for his master, and there another, licking of his wound 'gainst venomed sores, the only sovereign plaster. And here she meets another, sadly scowling, to whom she speaks, and he replies with howling, When he hath ceased his ill-resounding noise, another flap-mouthed mourner, black and grim, against the welkin volleys out his voice, another and another answer him, clapping their proud tails to the ground below, shaking their scratched ears, bleeding as they go. Look, how the world's poor people are amazed at apparitions, signs, and prodigies, whereon with fearful eyes they long have gazed, infusing them with dreadful prophecies. So she, at these sad signs, draws up her breath, and sighing it again, exclaims on death. Hard-favoured tyrant, ugly, meagre, lean, hateful divorce of love, thus chides she death. Grim grinning ghost, earth's worm, what dost thou mean to stifle beauty and to steal his breath? When he lived, his breath and beauty set gloss on the rose, smell to the violet. If he be dead, oh, no, it cannot be, seeing his beauty thou shouldst strike at it. Oh, yes, it may, thou hast no eyes to see, but hatefully at random dost thou hit. Thy mark is feeble age, but thy false dart mistakes that aim, and cleaves an infant's heart. Hadst thou but bid beware, then he had spoke, and hearing him thy power had lost his power. The destinies will curse thee for this stroke. They bid thee crop a weed, thou pluck'st a flower. Love's golden arrow at him should have fled, and not death's ebon dart to strike him dead. Dost thou drink tears that thou provokest such weeping? What may a heavy groan advantage thee? Why hast thou cast into eternal sleeping those eyes that taught all other eyes to see? Now nature cares not for thy mortal vigour, since her best work is ruined with thy rigour. Here overcome, as one full of despair she veiled her eyelids, who like sluices stopped the crystal tide that from her two cheeks fair in the sweet channel of her bosom dropped. But through the floodgates breaks the silver rain, and with his strong course opens them again. Oh, how her eyes and tears did lend and borrow, her eye seen in the tears, tears in her eye, both crystals where they viewed each other's sorrow, sorrow that friendly sighs sought still to dry. But like a stormy day, now wind, now rain, sighs dry her cheeks, tears make them wet again. Variable passions throng her constant woe, as striving who should best become her grief. All entertained, each passion labours so, that every present sorrow seemeth chief, but none is best. Then join they all together, like many clouds consulting for foul weather. By this, far off, she hears some huntsman holler, and nurse's song ne'er pleased her babe so well. The dire imagination she did follow, this sound of hope doth labour to expel. For now reviving joy bids her rejoice, and flatters her it is Adonis' voice. Whereat her tears began to turn their tide, being prisoned in her eyes like pearls in glass. Yet sometimes falls an orient drop beside, which her cheek melts, as scorning it should pass, to wash the foul face of the sluttish ground, who is but drunken when she seemeth drowned. Oh, hard believing love, how strange it seems not to believe, and yet too credulous. Thy weal and woe are both of them extremes, despair and hope makes thee ridiculous. The one doth flatter thee in thoughts unlikely, in likely thoughts the other kills thee quickly. Now she unweaves the web that she hath wrought. Adonis lives, and death is not to blame. It was not she that called him all to naught. Now she adds honours to his hateful name. She clips him king of graves, and grave for kings, imperious supreme of all mortal things. No, no, quoth she, sweet death, I did but jest. Yet pardon me, I felt a kind of fear, when as I met the boar, that bloody beast, which knows no pity, but is still severe. Then, gentle shadow, truth I must confess, I railed on thee, fearing my love's decease. 'Tis not my fault, the boar provoked my tongue. Be wreaked on him, invisible commander. 'Tis he, foul creature, that hath done thee wrong. I did but act, he's author of thy slander. Grief hath two tongues, and never woman yet could rule them both without 10 women's wit. Thus hoping that Adonis is alive, her rash suspect she doth extenuate, and that his beauty may the better thrive, with death she humbly doth insinuate, tells him of trophies, statues, tombs, and stories his victories, his triumphs, and his glories. "O love," quoth she, "how much a fool was I to be of such a weak and silly mind, to wail his death who lives and must not die till mutual overthrow of mortal kind. For he, being dead, with him is beauty slain, and beauty dead, black chaos comes again. Fie, fie, fond love, thou art as full of fear as one with treasure laden, hemmed with thieves. Trifles unwitnessed with eye or ear thy coward heart with false bethinking grieves." Even at this word she hears a merry horn, whereat she leaps, that was but late forlorn. As falcons to the lure, away she flies, the grass stoops not, she treads on it so light, and in her haste unfortunately spies the foul boar's conquest on her fair delight. Which scene, her eyes as murdered with the view, like stars ashamed of day, themselves withdrew, or as the snail, whose tender horns being hit, shrinks backward in his shelly cave with pain, and there, all smothered up in shade, doth sit long after fearing to creep forth again. So, at his bloody view, her eyes are fled into the deep dark cabins of her head, where they resign their office and their light to the disposing of her troubled brain, who bids them still consort with ugly night, and never wound the heart with looks again, who like a king, perplexed in his throne by their suggestion, gives a deadly groan, whereat each tributary subject quakes, as when the wind imprisoned in the ground, struggling for passage, earth's foundation shakes, which with cold terror doth men's minds confound. This mutiny each part doth so surprise, that from their dark beds once more leap her eyes, and being opened, through unwilling light, upon the wide wound that the boar had drenched in his soft flank, whose wonted lily white with purple tears that his wound wept was drenched. No flower was nigh, no grass, herb, leaf, or weed, but stole his blood, and seemed with him to bleed. This solemn sympathy poor Venus noteth, over one shoulder doth she hang her head. Dumbly she passions, frantically she doteth. She thinks he could not die, he is not dead. Her voice is stopped, her joints forget to bow, her eyes are mad that they have wept till now. Upon his hurt she looks so steadfastly that her sight dazzling makes the wound seem 3. And then she reprehends her mangling eye, that makes more gashes where no breach should be. His face seems twain, each several limb is doubled, for oft the eye mistakes, the brain being troubled. My tongue cannot express my grief for one, and yet, quoth she, behold two Adons dead. My sighs are blown away, my salt tears gone. Mine eyes are turned to fire, my heart to lead. Heavy heart's lead melt at mine eyes' red fire. So I shall die by drops of hot desire. Alas, poor world, what treasure hast thou lost? What face remains alive that's worth the viewing? What tongue is music now? What canst thou boast of things long since, or anything ensuing? The flowers are sweet, their colours fresh and trim, but true sweet beauty lived and died with him. Bonnet nor veil henceforth no creature wear, nor sun nor wind will ever strive to kiss you. Having no fair to lose, you need not fear. The sun doth scorn you, and the wind doth hiss you. But when Adonis lived, sun and sharp air lurked like two thieves to rob him of his fair. And therefore would he put his bonnet on, under whose brim the gaudy sun would peep. The wind would blow it off, and being gone, play with his locks. Then would Adonis weep, and straight in pity of his tender years they both would strive who first should dry his tears. To see his face, the lion walked along behind some hedge, because he would not fear him. To recreate himself when he hath sung, the tiger would be tame and gently hear him. If he had spoke, the wolf would leave his prey, and never fright the silly lamb that day. When he beheld his shadow in the brook, the fishes spread on it their golden gills. When he was by, the birds such pleasure took, that some would sing, some other in their bills would bring him mulberries and ripe red cherries. He fed them with his sight, they him with berries. But this foul, grim, and urchin-snouted boar, whose downward eye still looketh for a grave, ne'er saw the beauteous livery that he wore. Witness the entertainment that he gave. If he did see his face, why then I know he thought to kiss him, and hath killed him so. 'Tis true. 'Tis true. Thus was Adonis slain. He ran upon the boar with his sharp spear, who did not whet his teeth at him again, but by a kiss thought to persuade him there. And nuzzling in his flank the loving swine, sheathed unaware the tusk in his soft groin. Had I been toothed like him, I must confess with kissing him I should have killed him first. But he is dead, and never did he bless my youth with his, the more am I accursed. With this she falleth in the place she stood, and stains her face with his congealed blood. She looks upon his lips, and they are pale. She takes him by the hand, and that is cold. She whispers in his ears a heavy tale, as if they heard the woeful words she told. She lifts the coffer lids that close his eyes, where lo, two lamps burnt out in darkness lies. Two glasses where herself beheld 1,000 times, and now no more reflect, their virtue lost, wherein they late excelled, and every beauty robbed of his effect. Wonder of time, quoth she, this is my spite, that thou being dead, the day should yet be light. Since thou art dead, lo, here I prophesy, sorrow on love hereafter shall attend. It shall be waited on with jealousy, find sweet beginning but unsavoury end. Ne'er settled equally, but high or low, that all love's pleasure shall not match his woe. It shall be fickle, false, and full of fraud, bud and be blasted in a breathing while. The bottom poison, and the top o'erstored with sweets that shall the truest sight beguile. The strongest body shall it make most weak, strike the wise dumb, and teach the fool to speak. It shall be sparing, and too full of riot, teaching decrepit age to tread the measures. The staring ruffian shall it keep in quiet, pluck down the rich, enrich the poor with treasures. It shall be raging mad, and silly mild, make the young old, the old become a child. It shall suspect where is no cause of fear. It shall not fear where it should most mistrust. It shall be merciful and too severe, and most deceiving when it seems most just. Perverse it shall be where it shows most toward. Put fear to valour, courage to the coward. It shall be cause of war and dire events, and set dissension twixt the son and sire, subject and servile to all discontents, as dry combustious matter is to fire. Sith in his prime death doth my love destroy, they that love best their love shall not enjoy. By this the boy that by her side lay killed, was melted like a vapour from her sight, and in his blood that on the ground lay spilled, a purple flower sprung up, checkered with white, resembling well his pale cheeks, and the blood which in round drops upon their whiteness stood. She bows her head the new-sprung flower to smell, comparing it to her Adonis' breath, and says within her bosom it shall dwell, since he himself is reft from her by death. She crops the stalk, and in the breach appears green dropping sap, which she compares to tears. Poor flower, quoth she, this was thy father's guise, sweet issue of a more sweet-smelling sire. For every little grief to wet his eyes, to grow unto himself was his desire, and so 'tis thine. But know, it is as good to wither in my breast as in his blood. Here was thy father's bed, here in my breast. Thou art the next of blood, and 'tis thy right. Lo, in this hollow cradle take thy rest. My throbbing heart shall rock thee day and night. There shall not be 1 minute in an hour wherein I will not kiss my sweet love's flower. Thus, weary of the world, away she hies, and yokes her silver doves, by whose swift aid their mistress mounted through the empty skies, in her light chariot quickly is conveyed, holding their course to Paphos, where their queen means to immure herself and not be seen.
From off a hill, whose concave womb reworded a plaintful story from a sistering vale, my spirits to attend this double voice accorded, and down I laid to list the sad-tuned tale. Ere long espied a fickle maid full pale, tearing of papers, breaking rings atwain, storming her world with sorrow's wind and rain. Upon her head a plaited hive of straw, which fortified her visage from the sun, whereon the thought might think sometime it saw the carcass of a beauty spent and done. Time had not scythed all that youth begun, nor youth all quit, but spite of heaven's fell rage, some beauty peeped through lattice of seared age. Oft did she heave her napkin to her eyne, which on it had conceited characters, laundering the silken figures in the brine that seasoned woe had pelleted in tears, and often reading what content it bears, as often shrieking undistinguished woe in clamours of all size, both high and low. Sometime her levelled eyes their carriage ride, as they did battery to the spheres intend. Sometime diverted their poor balls are tied to the orbed earth. Sometime they do extend their view right on, anon their gazes lend to every place at once, and nowhere fixed, the mind and sight distractedly commixed. Her hair, nor loose nor tied in formal plait, proclaimed in her a careless hand of pride. For some untucked descended her sheaved hat, hanging her pale and pined cheek beside. Some in her threatened fillet still did bide, and true to bondage would not break from thence, though slackly braided in loose negligence. 1,000 favours from a mound she drew, of amber, crystal, and of beaded jet, which one by one she in a river threw, upon whose weeping margent she was set, like usury applying wet to wet. Or monarch's hands that let not bounty fall where want cries some, but where excess begs all. Of folded schedules had she many a one, which she perused, sighed, tore, and gave the flood, cracked many a ring of posed gold and bone, bidding them find their sepulchres in mud, found yet more letters sadly penned in blood, with sladed silk feet and affectedly enswathed and sealed to curious secrecy. These often bathed she in her fluxive eyes, and often kissed, and often gan to tear, cried, "O false blood, thou register of lies, what unapproved witness dost thou bear? Ink would have seemed more black and damned here." This said, in top of rage, the lines she rents, big discontent so breaking their contents. A reverend man that grazed his cattle nigh, sometime a blusterer that the ruffle knew of court of city, and had let go by the swiftest hours, observed as they flew, towards his afflicted fancy fastly drew, and, privileged by age, desires to know in brief the grounds and motives of her woe. So slides he down upon his grained bat, and comely distant sits he by her side, when he again desires her, being set, her grievance with his hearing to divide, if that from him there may be aught applied which may her suffering ecstasy assuage, 'tis promised in the charity of age. "Father," she says, "though in me you behold the injury of many a blasting hour, let it not tell your judgment I am old, not age but sorrow over me hath power. I might as yet have been a spreading flower, fresh to myself, if I had self-applied love to myself, and to no love beside. But woe is me, too early I attended a youthful suit. It was to gain my grace, of one by nature's outward so commended, that maiden's eyes stuck over all his face. Love lacked a dwelling, and made him her place. And when in his fair parts she did abide, she was new lodged and newly deified. His browny locks did hang in crooked curls, and every light occasion of the wind upon his lips their silken parcels hurls. What sweet to do will aptly find. Each eye that saw him did enchant the mind, for on his visage was in little drawn what largeness thinks in paradise was sown. Small show of man was yet upon his chin. His phoenix down began but to appear, like unshorn velvet on that termless skin, whose bare outbragged the web it seemed to wear. Yet showed his visage by that cost more dear, and nice affections wavering stood in doubt, if best were as it was, or best without. His qualities were beauteous as his form, for maiden-tongued he was, and thereof free. Yet if men moved him, was he such a storm as oft 'twixt May and April is to see, when winds breathe sweet, unruly though they be. His rudeness so with his authorized youth did livery falseness in a pride of truth. Well could he ride, and often men would say, that horse his mettle from his rider takes. Proud of subjection, noble by the sway, what rounds, what bounds, what course, what stop he makes, and controversy hence a question takes, whether the horse by him became his deed, or he his manage by the well-doing steed. But quickly on this side the verdict went. His real habitude gave life and grace to appertainings and to ornament, accomplished in himself, not in his case. All aids, themselves made fairer by their place, came for additions, yet their purpose trim pieced not his grace, but were all graced by him. So on the tip of his subduing tongue all kinds of arguments and question deep, all replication prompt and reason strong, for his advantage still did wake and sleep, to make the weeper laugh, the laugher weep. He had the dialect and different skill, catching all passions in his craft of will, that he did in the general bosom reign of young, of old, and sexes both enchanted, to dwell with him in thought or to remain in personal duty, following where he haunted. Consents bewitched ere he desire have granted, and dialogued for him what he would say, asked their own wills, and made their wills obey. Many there were that did his picture get to serve their eyes, and in it put their mind, like fools that in the imagination set the goodly objects which abroad they find of lands and mansions theirs in thought assigned, and labouring in more pleasures to bestow them than the true gouty landlord which doth owe them. So many have that never touched his hand, sweetly supposed the mistress of his heart. My woeful self, that did in freedom stand, and was my own fee simple, not in part, what with his art in youth and youth in art, threw my affections in his charmed power, reserved the stalk, and gave him all my flower. Yet did I not, as some my equals did, demand of him, nor being desired, yielded. Finding myself in honour so forbid, with safest distance I mine honour shielded. Experience for me many bulwarks builded of proofs new bleeding, which remained the foil of this false jewel and his amorous spoil. But whoever shunned by precedent the destined ill she must herself essay, or forced examples gainst her own content to put the bypast perils in her way. Counsel may stop a while what will not stay, for when we rage, advice is often seen by blunting us to make our wits more keen. Now gives it satisfaction to our blood that we must curb it upon others' proof, to be forbid the sweets that seem so good for fear of harms that preach in our behoof. O appetite, from judgment stand aloof. The one a palate hath that needs will taste, though reason weep and cry it is thy last. For further I could say, this man's untrue, and knew the patterns of his foul beguiling, heard where his plants in others' orchards grew, saw how deceits were gilded in his smiling, knew vows were ever brokers to defiling, thought characters and words merely but art, and bastards of his foul adulterate heart. And long upon these terms I held my city, till thus he gan beseech me. Gentle maid, have of my suffering youth some feeling pity, and be not of my holy vows afraid. That's to ye sworn to none was ever said. For feasts of love I have been called unto, till now did ne'er invite, nor never woo. All my offences that abroad you see are errors of the blood, none of the mind. Love made them not, with acture they may be, where neither party is nor true nor kind. They sought their shame, that so their shame did find, and so much less of shame in me remains, by how much of me their reproach contains. Among the many that mine eyes have seen, not one whose flame my heart so much as warmed, or my affection put to the smallest teen, or any of my leisures ever charmed. Harm have I done to them, but ne'er was harmed, kept hearts in liveries, but mine own was free, and reigned commanding in his monarchy. Look here, what tributes wounded fancies sent me, of paled pearls, and rubies red as blood, figuring that they their passions likewise lent me, of griefs and blushes aptly understood, in bloodless white and the encrimsoned mood, effects of terror and dear modesty encamped in hearts, but fighting outwardly. And lo, behold these talents of their hair, with twisted metal amorously impleached, I have received from many a several fair, their kind acceptance weepingly beseeched, with the annextions of fair gems enriched, and deep-brained sonnets, that did amplify each stone's dear nature, worth, and quality. The diamond, why it was beautiful and hard, whereto his invised properties did tend. The deep green emerald, in whose fresh regard weak sights their sickly radiance do amend. The heaven-hued sapphire, and the opal blend with objects manifold. Each several stone with wit well blazoned, smiled or made some moan. Lo, all these trophies of affection's heart, of pensive and subdued desires the tender, nature hath charged me that I hoard them not, but yield them up where I myself must render, that is to you, my origin and ender. For these of force must your oblations be, since I their altar, you in patron me. Oh, then advance of yours that phraseless hand, whose white weighs down the airy scale of praise. Take all these similes to your own command, hallowed with sighs that burning lungs did raise. What me your minister for you obeys, works under you, and to your audit comes their distract parcels in combined sums. Lo, this device was sent me from a nun, whose sister sanctified of holiest note, which late her noble suit in court did shun, whose rarest havings made the blossoms dote. For she was sought by spirits of richest coat, but kept cold distance, and did thence remove to spend her living in eternal love. But, oh, my sweet, what labour is to leave the thing we have not, mastering what not strives, paling the place which did no form receive, playing patient sports in unconstrained gyves. She that her fame so to herself contrives, the scars of battle scapeth by the flight, and makes her absence valiant, not her might. Oh, pardon me, in that my boast is true. The accident which brought me to her eye upon the moment did her force subdue. And now she would the caged cloister fly. Religious love put out religion's eye. Not to be tempted would she be immured, and now to tempt all, liberty procured. How mighty then you are, oh, hear me tell. The broken bosoms that to me belong have emptied all their fountains in my well, and mine I pour your ocean all among. I strong o'er them, and you o'er me being strong, must for your victory us all congest, as compound love to physic your cold breast. My parts had power to charm a sacred nun, who disciplined, I dieted in grace, believed her eyes when they to assail begun, all vows and consecrations giving place. O most potential love, thou bond nor space, in thee hath neither sting, knot, nor confine, for thou art all, and all things else are thine. When thou impressest, what a precept's worth of stale example. When thou wilt inflame, how coldly those impediments stand forth of wealth, of filial fear, law, kindred, fame. Love's arms are peace, gainst rule, gainst sense, gainst shame, and sweetens in the suffering pangs it bears the aloes of all forces, shocks and fears. Now all these hearts that do on mine depend, feeling it break, with bleeding groans they pine, and supplicant their sighs do you extend, to leave the battery that you make gainst mine, lending soft audience to my sweet design, and credence sole to that strong bonded oath that shall prefer and undertake my troth. This said, his watery eyes he did dismount, whose sights till then were levelled on my face. Each cheek a river running from a fount, with brinish current downward flowed apace. Oh, how the channel to the stream gave grace, who glazed with crystal gate the glowing roses that flame through water which their hue encloses. Oh, Father, what a hell of witchcraft lies in the small orb of one particular tear. But with the inundation of the eyes, what rocky heart to water will not wear? What breast so cold that is not warmed here? O cleft affect, cold modesty, hot wrath, both fire from hence and chill extinct your hath. For lo, his passion but an art of craft, even there resolved my reason into tears. There my white stole of chastity I daffed, shook off my sober guards and civil fears, appear to him as he to me appears, all melting, though our drops this difference bore. His poisoned me, and mine did him restore. In him a plenitude of subtle matter, applied to cortals all strange forms receives, of burning blushes, or of weeping water, or swounding paleness, and he takes and leaves, in either's aptness as it best deceives. to blush at speeches rank, or weep at woes, or to turn white and swoon at tragic shows. That not a heart which in his level came could scape the hail of his all-hurting aim, showing fair nature is both kind and tame, and veiled in them did win whom he would maim. Against the thing he sought he would exclaim. When he most burned in heart-wished luxury, he preached pure maid and praised cold chastity. Thus, merely with the garment of a grace, the naked and concealed fiend he covered, that the unexperienced gave the tempter place, which like a cherubin above them hovered. Who young and simple would not be so loved? I me, I fell, and yet do question me what I should do again for such a sake. Oh, that infected moisture of his eye! Oh, that false fire which in his cheek so glowed! Oh, that forced thunder from his heart did fly! Oh, that sad breath his spongy lungs bestowed! Oh, all that borrowed motion, seeming owed, would yet again betray the fore-betrayed, and new pervert a reconciled maid.